Hey, everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. When I was a kid, maybe high school, college. Actually, I think it was college. I saw a movie called Swing Kids. Do you remember this one? It's an oft-forgotten film. I think super young Newsies era Christian Bale might have been in this. Don't quote me on that. I could be mistaken. I thought it was a good show, but I haven't seen it since whenever I first saw it in the 1990s. I do remember that the soundtrack was real cool because it was all the music I was raised on. It's just big band swing, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman kind of stuff. And the idea is that it's Nazi Germany. Things are real bad, but there are these German kids who rally around music from another culture. And they're told that people who don't look like them ethnically, they're not good for anything and they're problematic, but they like music that black people are making and the Americans are making and the Jews are making. And it messes with their brains. And through this music, they become resistors to what's going on in Nazi Germany. But as is the case in every plot line ever like this, the whole thing gets wrecked by a collaborator, somebody who turns heel. They get jealous over a girl or jealous over attention, or I don't know, somehow the devil gets in them. They look into the darkness. They can't pull themselves out and they collaborate. Now, sometimes you see these kind of stories unfold and you're like, oh, that poor collaborator, he got duped. Somebody played him and immediately he knows, no, what have I done? I didn't think it was going to go this far. And in a way, maybe that's even kind of what you're seeing with Judas Iscariot in the book of Matthew. But then there's another type of collaborator archetype, and this is the one who just goes pure evil and they never come back. They know dang well what the consequences of their actions will be. They know what happens if they make that phone call. They know what happens if they give that anonymous tip, but they do it anyway. And as you watch it, you just cannot help but think that is the height of hatred, because what's going to happen to the people you're selling out it's not nice. It's over the top. I mean, the regime is going to crack down on them. And that's the kind of thing that we're getting in Matthew 27. Jesus isn't going to go face a Roman torture method because a bunch of people who liked him but weren't quite sure what to make of it in that crowd were yelling about him being executed, and they were kind of conflicted. Look, whoever got whipped into a frenzy in that crowd, they hated Jesus because they knew how the Romans killed people, and they still wanted him to endure it. The original audience of the book of Matthew, as we're here in Matthew chapter 27, this would have stung for them even more in the same way that you know what the Nazis are going to do if they find out somebody was resisting the regime in a movie about Nazism, because that's a story we tell a lot right now. You know it's going to be horrible and torturous and pure evil. You know it's the height of hatred to sell out your friend to a Nazi if you're in Nazi Germany. Likewise here, everybody would have known the Romans, well, they really kill people, and Jesus will be lucky if all that happens to him is crucifixion. As we talked about yesterday, execution methods in the ancient world got really crazy, and the crazier ones all came with a set of connotations. We've talked about how flogging and crucifixion were set aside to make points about insurrectionists, about murderers, the people who would most oppose the established by the pagan deities above government of Rome, of the establishment. And we talked about how these kind of punishments were meant to humiliate. They were meant to make an example out of people. And theoretically, the Jewish people should have looked at what the Romans were doing, and they should have been like, that's a little much. That's one of our gripes with our overlords. Instead, they weaponized this Roman impulse toward violence and torture for their own benefit. What kind of violence and torture, you might be asking? Well, I came prepared to give you some examples of this. The expression got sacked, which is interesting because we use that in football. We use that in employment when somebody gets canned or gets sacked. It is possible that you can trace that all the way back to a Roman execution method that is demonstrative of the same kind of cruel impulse that went into the thinking behind Jesus' crucifixion. In Roman society, if somebody was found guilty of patricide, that is, killing your own dad or parents, this punishment of the sack would be broken out, where you would be sewn into a burlap sack and thrown into a river to drown, but not alone in the burlap sack. You would get thrown into the sack with other creatures who were known to kill their own kin, including a dog, a rooster, a primate of some sort, and a certain type of viper known to do the same. The idea there, I think, being that maybe a baby viper couldn't control its venom, and in the process of being a little baby viper, maybe they imagined that it would kill a parent by loosing venom on it indiscriminately or accidentally. I don't know if the whole biology side of all of this actually holds up, but that was the thinking of the Romans. But they didn't just throw anybody in the sack. Like, if you stole a whole bunch of money, you're not going in the sack. That's not how things work. It's reserved for patricide, and everybody knew it was reserved for patricide. So if you sold someone out who you knew had maybe even justifiably in self-defense killed a parent, well, you know that ratting them out means they're getting that punishment. So you must have really wanted them to suffer because you knew that's what was going to happen. I talked about the Persian punishment of the boats the other day. That is death by consumption from microorganisms and scavengers and rodents and things like that. The Romans adopted that. They had a version of it as well. I don't think they put you in a boat. I think they just put you in a big bucket, and then you would be in a stock above the bucket with the rest of your body in this bucket or barrel. And then the parasites would, I don't know that they even had to introduce the parasites. I think maybe the parasites just showed up. But effectively, you'd sit out in the sun and bake and be eaten from the inside out. This one was particularly popular during some of the persecutions of Christians. Was this a way to make a mockery of the idea of being indwelt by the Holy Spirit? I don't know. Could be. But eventually, people came to understand if you rat out a Christian during one of these, rat out, that was not intentional. That was super not intentional. Also, I'm going to keep it. If you sold out or collaborated against a Christian, you knew that's what you were sentencing them to. You hear rumors all the way from ancient Rome up to the Middle Ages of people accused of a certain intimacy, predilection, or preference being killed with metal being inserted into a certain orifice to burn them from the inside out. If you collaborated or ratted somebody out with such accusations, you must really hate them because you knew that it was likely that that was going to be the punishment. Not all the time, but under certain regimes. At certain times in the history of Roman torture and execution, if somebody was guilty of embezzling from the state, embezzling from the treasury of a governor or a ruler, and you reported them or sold them out, you would know you'd better really hate them and want them to suffer, because you would know that one punishment that such a leader might have at their disposal would be to pour molten lead or molten gold into the mouth of the person accused of stealing those resources from under the nose of a powerful governor. Very famously, one of the members of the Triumvirate, a powerful group of leaders in ancient Rome that included Julius Caesar as well as Pompey, a guy named Crassus, he got killed in this manner as a way to make a mockery of his love of wealth. If you knew a servant or a slave who had tried to escape a contract or escape a state of servitude from their master, and you sold them out and turned them in, you must really, really hate them, because starting in the mid-2nd century BC in Rome, a practice came back from North Africa after a series of wars there between the Carthaginians and the Romans. And this practice involved saying, hey, you like trying to run away? Cool. Well, then we're going to throw you in this gigantic Colosseum in this arena, and we're going to let you try to run away from ravenous beasts who will eventually catch you and rip you limb from limb for the entertainment of the upper class and the nobility, and to send a loud and clear message to other people of the servant or slave class. And likewise, this is where it comes full circle. If you accused someone of insurrection, of resistance to the government, of trying to undermine their authority, of some sort of treason, and you officially lodged such a complaint with a governor or with somebody who had the power of the sword, you must really, really hate the person you're accusing. Everybody, empire-wide under Roman rule, knew that if you made such an accusation, there was a real good chance that that person was going to be flogged, that that person was going to be stripped down and nailed directly to a big chunk of wood and put on public display to bleed out and suffocate in front of everybody as a mark of shame and as a message to the world. This is what happens when you challenge the Roman status quo. This is what happens when you occupied people challenge our authority. Do not raise your hand against Rome. So the original audience, I think they're reading this stuff in Matthew 27, where everybody's yelling, "Let Barabbas go, let his blood be on our hands, crucify him." And then as we turn to the next verse, and Pilate lets Barabbas, who, according to Roman law at least, deserves such a punishment, go, and Jesus heads off to the flogging post. Well, this is going to stir a lot of emotions for the original audience reading this under the occupation and the heavy boot of Rome, and the always present specter of Roman violence and punishment looming right over their head, looming over every private conversation over a drink that might get a little bit too loose-lipped that you have with friends around a table seemingly in private. This kind of violence in response to these kind of reports would change things about society. And so a lot of stuff is going to be conjured in the minds and the emotions of the original audience as they think, man, those people in that crowd must have truly detested Jesus because they knew what was going to happen here. And also, man, you got to be careful even lodging those kind of accusations, because what's to keep somebody from lodging one against you? That is a very live by the sword, die by the sword kind of proposition. So we read this and we see the injustice, and we're reading it right to see the injustice. We read this and we see the pain, and we're reading it right to see the pain. The original audience, though, I think would have had another level of appreciation for what's going on here because of their awareness of torture and execution methods associated with certain sets of crimes in the ancient world. And so I think this would have popped in a little different way for them. And maybe we understand that a touch better now after going down this dark path of exploring these awful practices the Romans employed. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.